Okay. So we're going to be studying session 6 today. And I'm going to do a little invocation again. I especially like presencing Ra. And they are so central and instrumental to our being together. Ra, those of Ra, we greet you, and I call to you to support this study, to help us in our growth and understanding and evolution, and to ask for us to be supported in learning in a way that we can apply it in our lives and radiate out the benefit that we receive from this time studying and being together. I offer my deep thanks and gratitude to those of Ra. Okay. So as has been the rhythm for the past few weeks, I'm going to go ahead and read through the notes on the major points that we'll cover today, just to give us a bit of an overview. One, the third area of healing is given, the spirit complex. And then the appropriateness and proscriptions for an additional participant at a future channeling session. And then we go into Ra's history, Venusian origin, and their mode of travel to Earth when they came. The conditions of Venus for supporting life and the suitability for 5th and 6th density work. Ra's method of creating bodies for themselves to inhabit while visiting Earth. And then permission was given to Ra by the Council of Saturn. And the location of the Council of Saturn. Question of life on other planets in our solar system. Maldek's history and the transfer to Earth for continued incarnation and learning, and the timeline of all that. Earth, humanity's mixed origins. Harvest, the mechanics and relation to the law of one. The major cycles. And Earth's current vibratory position. Confusion and inconvenience. The percentage of the population of Earth to transition to 4D. And Ra's reason for renewed contact. And then we get into UFOs, the disc-shaped versus Ra's bell-shaped crystal-powered craft, and a little bit of a visitation timeline. Other UFO visitors, the Confederation of Planets in service to the infinite creator. A discussion of focusing on the law of one versus transient material, and then ending with a little bit of contact maintenance, as usual. So it's a little bit of a longer session than normal. So we'll have to be mindful of that if we want to get through all the reading. So yeah, we can all just do our best to find the right balance of, how much we want to be able to read through all the material, which I tend to like to do, versus, being able to have enough time to talk about everything that we read. So let's just do our best. BJ?
I want to offer a personal invitation for us all to take what resonates and leave anything else. There's no need to, from my perspective, believe Ra or to make this into a religion. We're just learning and evolving here. So there's my invitation.
Awesome. Thank you for saying that. I actually wanted to say something similar. I love that at the top of these, I'm reading the session from LL's webpage, and they, at the beginning of every session, they put a reminder of what you just said. Please use your discrimination and judgment in assessing this material. If something rings true to you, fine. If something does not resonate, please leave it behind, for neither we nor those of the Confederation would wish to be a stumbling block for any. And that is such a great and beautiful and mature and balanced reminder. So thanks, BJ. Okay, let's get into it. Would anyone like to start our reading?
I'll read.
Great.
Okay, session 6, January 24th, 1981. I am Ra. I greet you in the love and the light of the infinite creator. I communicate now. Questioner, we would like to continue the material from yesterday. We had to cease before inaudible. I am Ra. This is well with us. We proceed now with the third area of teach learning concerning the development of the energy powers of healing. The third area is the spiritual complex, which embodies the fields of force and consciousness, which are the least distorted of your mind-body-spirit complex. The exploration and balancing of the spirit complex is indeed the longest and most subtle part of your learned teaching. We have considered the mind a tree. The mind controls the body. With the mind single-pointed, balanced, and aware, the body comfortable in whatever biases and distortions make it appropriately balanced for that instrument, the instrument is then ready to proceed with the great work. That is the work of wind and fire. The spiritual body energy field is a pathway or channel. When body and mind are receptive and open, then the spirit can become a functioning shuttle or communicator from the entity's individual energy of will upwards and from the streamings of the creative fire and wind downwards. The healing ability, like all other, what this instrument would call paranormal abilities, is affected by the opening of a pathway or shuttle into intelligent infinity. There are many upon your plane who have a random hole or gateway in their spirit energy field, sometimes created by the ingestion of chemicals, such as what this instrument would call LSD, who are able, randomly and without control, to tap into energy sources. They may or may not be entities who wish to serve. The purpose of carefully and consciously opening this channel is to serve in a more dependable way, in a more commonplace or usual way, as seen by the distortion complex of the healer. To others, there may appear to be miracles. To the one who has carefully opened the door to intelligent infinity, this is ordinary, this is commonplace, this is as it should be. The life experience becomes somewhat transformed, and the great work goes on. At this time, we feel these exercises suffice for your beginning. We will, at a future time, when you feel you have accomplished that which is set before you, begin to guide you into a more precise understanding of the functions and uses of this gateway in the experience of healing.
Great. Thank you. Wow. So curious to hear what y'all make of that or think about that.
Were they talking mostly about people have taken LSD? Were they talking mostly about using that gateway? I missed that. No.
I think they were referring to LSD as like an outlier of a way, like a potential way that someone can be open to energy, but that what I think they're talking about is balancing mind and body sufficiently such that the spirit is available as a shuttle, and then how that is just a natural commonplace thing. Like we can think of it as this esoteric, exotic kind of thing, but it actually is just a natural process of healing and balancing.
Could you read the last sentence again? I guess that's where I got the idea that they were talking about that gateway as LSD.
We will at a future time, when you feel you have accomplished that which is set before you, begin to guide you into a more precise understanding of the functions and uses of this gateway in the experience of healing.
Okay, thanks.
Scott, I see that you have your hand raised. Let me just comment on in response to Farrellyn's question. I think they're kind of pointing to the phenomenon that you know, the spiritual energies and working in the spirit with the spiritual body is available to everybody, and there are sort of shortcuts that people can take to kind of like springboard up into those higher centers and begin to like have you know, experiences and sight and, you know, all sorts of phenomenon that have to do with making contact with the higher centers. But if we use a springboard, then it may be random, and it could also be not necessarily aligned with the soul's intentions relative to, are they trying to be of service or not, etc. So they were sort of like saying a little kind of just giving a little context for you know, doing spiritual healing and doing spiritual work in general. I don't know if that helps or not, but
Yeah, thank you.
Scott.
Yeah, a couple thoughts. My initial thing was I had a question about that one line when it says the mind is single pointed, and that I can read that sentence again to put it into context. And then in regards to Farrell's question, similarly to what Aaron and BJ is saying, I think one thing that seems to be Ra's communicating and the use of the word random seems really important in that answer. So for instance, with the use of LSD, I think with my interpretation is they're saying you can open yourself up to this vast world of spirit. And there's as Malidoma would say, there's a lot of energies out there. So you got to be mindful. And there did say something about not all are on the service path or something like that, or service to other. That was my interpretation. They were kind of giving a warning there that the random is a way to open up that channel. And then but the use of the upward will and the intention, they didn't use the word intention. Like you can have a very, very clear intention to do it in, like as you were saying, like it's the will of the soul or something like that. And I think there's when the intention is pure good and service to the whole, we're not as susceptible to attack, so to speak. That's my interpretation. But going back to, yeah, I just had a question about that. I mean, wonder what anybody's thoughts are. I can read the sentence again. We have considered the mind as a tree. The mind controls the body. With the mind single-pointed, balanced and aware, the body comfortable in whatever biases and distortions make it appropriately balanced for that instrument, the instrument is then ready to proceed with the great work, which is such a beautiful thing. But I don't understand with the mind single pointed, but maybe it's the same thing that I was saying, like with a clear intention. So, thoughts?
I think you just answered your question.
Maybe I did through asking it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just so that you can focus without all the biases and distractions. Like the whole point of all the previous work is just to clear yourself so that you can start the spiritual work. That's my interpretation.
Yeah, me too.
Did you have a question or comment,
Yeah,
Sean?
I did. Okay. So building off on what Scott said, so now in last session, Ra gives like kind of somewhat specific instructions of how to clear the mind and body, like identifying your mental biases and identifying, like balancing those in your body, the biases of your body, and like addressing those. And this seems a lot more vague to me, because he says once you've done that, you can now do the great work. Okay, so what exactly is this great work? Like is there, like, what are you supposed to do here? Like, once you get to this point, so he tells us, yes, it's a shuttle. You can communicate stuff. Is there like spiritual balancing that needs to be done, or like it seems a little bit more vague than the previous instructions?
Yep, totally. Dana, did you want to reply?
The great work is the healing work, I believe. That's what Ra's referring to. Don has asked Ra to instruct him in the ways of healing. And Ra's attempting to do that. Healing and balancing, they're one and the same. So I think Ra's just saying the healing work can start once you're focused and ready to tap that gateway.
So he does. So he says that this third part is the longest and hardest, right? So is that basically like that the like getting better at the healing work is what he's referring to, like really understanding how to, like, it seems like, okay, you've made it past the beginner and now the real work starts. And then he just leaves it at that. I think, yeah.
Well, and remember that Ra defines healing as basically being the same thing as knowing the law of one. So we tend to think of healing as, more of a narrow activity that we could involve ourselves in. And Ra talks about healing as like remembering that you're the creator. And I think that when it gets to the spiritual complex healing work, it really is directly related to knowing yourself as the creator more and more. So in the three-step teaching that Ra gives, or the shorthand of like the path of the adept, know yourself, accept yourself, become the creator. The spiritual body work, I think, is very focused on knowing yourself as the creator.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
And I think that the balancing work of the spiritual complex has to do with refinements around how we conceive of our own will and intention and that of the creator. I think the balancing between like the personal will and the creative will, the will of the creator, and understanding how those two or seemingly two forces correspond. Farrelyn?
And I think that means just for each of us to start where we are, just keep going from where we are in each way that we discern is appropriate, however we want to serve, wherever we feel we need to heal. Maybe that's obvious, but
Yeah.
That's our privilege of being in this work, is we get to apply our free will and make choices to do what we want to do, however it looks. It's all different for each of us. Similarities with similar values, but there's no prescribed thing to do, to heal or to serve.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Shang wrote, wind and fire shape water and earth in creation in an earlier excerpt. I thought about that too. And I'm so interested when Ra says, that is the work of wind and fire. The spiritual body energy field is a pathway or channel. When body and mind are receptive and open, then the spirit can become a functioning shuttle or communicator from the entity's individual energy of will upward, and from the streamings of the creative fire and wind downwards. The streamings of the creative fire and wind downwards. What is that? What do y'all think that is referring to?
I just want to chime in because that's why I put the question up there. I'm curious about the use of the words wind and fire. Like that whole part really struck me too. And then Sean gave the answer or his thought of wind and fire, shape, water, and earth in creation in an earlier excerpt. So then it made me think I started to write something, but yeah, I mean it's like what it's saying, that the spiritual part of the spirit, body, mind, spirit complex, which we could call different names probably. Maybe we refer to that as the higher self or the eternal self, has direct contact with intelligent infinity. And through that vehicle, that instrument, can, I guess, impact and influence both the mind and the body and create the conditions for healing. But it's interesting that I guess then I would say, so myself as a mind, body, spirit complex, of my mind, what part of myself then would be, what is the action or activity of myself to initiate that?
Well, it seems to me, it all starts with that intention, that will that we've been talking about, to sit, to quiet the body, to quiet the mind, and to point our gaze, point our awareness towards that gateway, towards the creator, towards the place that we are connected to God. And that's the sort of master gesture of this whole thing, it seems like, is choosing to spend our time right. It's just like we can choose to do so many different things. Wasn't that Farrellyn that was just saying, like, we can choose to do so many different things, but to choose to sit and to do all the preparatory work and then point our awareness at its own source, to point our awareness at that which creates it. I mean, how many times, I'm just curious to hear, this is just a quick little, straw poll. How many times do you feel like this world and our culture, tells us and supports us to do that? Like, how much support do you get? How much guidance and encouragement do you get to do that work?
From the outside, very little. Oh, BJ's
Right.
hand's up. Sorry.
BJ, did you want to reply?
I raised my hand, not for the poll.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I could chime in about the poll. Like, it seems like, yeah, definitely from the outside, very little. That's not our culture. And at the same time, I don't know, I think the more that we are tuned in to something else, we get a lot of support to do that, because it reinforces itself, and then there's an inner knowing to tune in more. And yeah, so I kind of have both answers, like, oh no, definitely not, but then, oh yes, definitely. Definitely get supported to tune in.
Yeah. Rachel?
It's Rachel.
No, yeah, it's Rachel. I feel like speaking generally about wider culture, it seems like it's more encouraged when it's profitable for the person to encourage it. If that makes any sense. Just like I see a lot of monetization of tuning in and spiritual concepts. So it seems like in speaking generally about wider society.
Yeah. Okay, BJ, did you want to share your thought or?
Yeah, just in answer to the question that you asked earlier about the wind and fire, what does that make you think of? And I'm not an expert on this, and it's partly why I'm bringing it up. But what it reminds me of is the upward and downward spiraling light, and like it seems like what I get from this is the wind and fire is the downward spiraling light, and then they said also the individual energy of will seems like the upward spiraling light, which I definitely haven't mastered those teachings, but that's what it made me think of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that. Scott?
Yeah, how I would answer your question for me personally would be, my perception is that the dominant culture in which I grew up in is very well constructed to prohibit that from happening, whether it's conscious or unconscious. And the seeker within me, I'd say, has sought it out and found many avenues during my life, and communities and culture to be in contact with that. And that's vitally important to my sanity and my peace of mind. And I mean, just like finding this community, and I think it's, got to a point after a while, like once I answered the call, I want to say, then it seems like spirit, for lack of a better word or whatever, it's always there to remind me when I get a little sidetracked. So, and just landing in Nashville, where there's just access to so much. There's been so much access for me, whether it's like now, the sweat lodges again, Love One community, all the work that we've done, doing the work at Forest Floor, doing the work with Malidoma, like teepee ceremonies. I was just talking to Julie for a long time yesterday. It's really nice to reconnect with her. So much, everything. When I got here, it was like everything I was looking for is here and then some. So, but it's also, it takes a lot of courage and dedication to do really deeply healing spiritual work and the work of self-realization, the ongoingness of it.
Yeah. Totally.
That's my answer.
Yeah, thank you. I have a vision of this upward downward spiral. I just want to share in case it, of course I don't know for sure, but I just want to share it in case it helps anyone else. We know that the creator wants to know itself, wants to experience itself. And we know that the creator set up this, this cascading operation through the logos and the sublogoi and the sub-sublogoi to create the universe so that it can have a context to experience itself. And there's sort of two sides to that. There's the side of the creator that manifests it all, that generates it, that sends forth love and light, that sends forth energy and matter to coalesce into universes and worlds and people. And then there's the creator that looks back into it. And I feel like that's the sort of upward and downward spiral. The downward spiral is the creator that's looking, and the upward spiral is the creator that's manifesting. And it's kind of as simple as that. And we are both of those things. We're made up of the manifestation, of course. We have these vehicles, we have these minds, And we also are centered by that which sees it all and experiences it all. And that's the downward spiral. That's the eye of God right in the center of us. Whoa. I see Scott and BJ's hand up. Scott, I don't know if yours is still up from before.
I'll just say, I, since remembering that upward and downward spiraling light, and then going, oh yeah, what is that again? I'm looking at the chapter in Concept Guide at the end on Kundalini, and I would be into having, I don't know whether it be an additional study group or just take a week, you know, instead of session 7 next week or whatever. I would be into having a group study on this chapter, because that seems just so fascinating and I would love to grok it more. Or it could be just a, you know, not in this time slot if we don't want to get off track, but I would put in a vote for reading that.
Nice. That is juicy material for sure. I remember reading it. It's really good, really thought-provoking. Okay, so we have
Yes, that's Gary's book, and also Diana.
Yep.
With the author.
Yeah. We have less than an hour. Let us keep carrying forward. Could someone read 6.2 through 6.4?
I'll read it.
Awesome.
Okay, 6.2, questioner. I've been asked if it is possible for Tom Flaherty to attend one of these communication sessions tomorrow. Are you familiar with the entity Tom Flaherty? I am Ra. This mind-body-spirit complex, sound vibration of Tom Flaherty, is acceptable. We caution you to carefully instruct this entity in the frame of mind and various appurtenances which it must understand before it is conducted into the circle. Keep going.
Yes, please.
Questioner, I'm not quite sure what you meant by appurtenances. Ra, I was referring to the symbolic objects which trigger this instrument's distortions toward love light. The placement and loving acceptance of them by all present is important in the nurturing of this instrument. Therefore, the appurtenances involved must be described and their presence explained in your own words of teach learning, for you have the proper attitude for the required results. Questioner, he'll understand me. We'll be very careful to totally inform Tom before he attends. Thank you very much. It seems to me that it might be an appropriate time to include a little more historical background of yourself, possibly information having to do with where you came from prior to involvement with planet Earth, if this is possible. I am Ra. I am, with the social memory complex, of which I am a part, one of those who voyaged outward from another planet within your own solar system, as this entity would call it. The planetary influence was that you call Venus. We are a race old in your measures. When we were at the 6th dimension, our physical beings were what you would call golden. We were tall and somewhat delicate. Our physical body complex covering, which you call the integument, had a golden luster. In this form, we decided to come among your peoples. Your peoples at that time were much unlike us in physical appearance, as you might call it. We thus did not mix well with the population and were obviously other than they. Thus, our visit was relatively short, for we found ourselves in the hypocritical position of being acclaimed as other than your other selves. This was the time during which we built the structures in which you show interest. Keep going.
Let me just pause about this footnote. So there's a footnote on the website anyway that clarifies that when they say when we were at the 6th dimension, that there's it seems likely that they meant to say 3rd dimension. When they were in 3rd density, when they had bodies, because in sixth density, they're light beings. There's no physical body. So if they had, when they're describing their physical beings and their integument, they probably meant third density, not sixth.
Good catch. I forgot to note the footnote.
Any questions on that, or shall we keep reading? Questions, comments?
I think let's keep reading.
Great. Yeah, keep reading if you will, Diana.
How did you journey from Venus to this planet? Ra, we used thought. Questioner, would it be possible to take one of the people at that time from our planet and place him on Venus? Would he survive? Were conditions much inaudible? Ra, the third density conditions are not hospitable to the life forms of your peoples. The fifth and sixth dimensions of that planetary sphere are quite conducive to growing, learning, teaching. Questioner, how were you able to make the transition from Venus? And I assume the sixth dimension, which, would that be invisible when you reached here? Did you have to change your dimensions to walk on the earth? Ra, you will remember the exercise of the wind. The dissolution into nothingness is the dissolution into unity, for there is no nothingness. From the sixth dimension, we are capable of manipulating, by thought, the intelligent infinity present in each particle of light, or distorted light, so that we were able to clothe ourselves in a replica visible in the third density of our mind-body-spirit complexes in the sixth density. We were allowed this experiment by the council which guards this planet. Questioner.
Okay. Let's pause there. There's some juicy tidbits, very interesting content there. So first of all, I want to just check, do people feel like they understand what Ra's saying there? Is that making sense? No. Okay. Well, let's review it. Rachel, what parts there feel like you could understand better?
I just have a difficult time understanding it because I tend to understand things visually,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard for me to visualize what they're talking about. It's hard for me to visualize in a symbol or in a way like intelligent infinity present in each particle of light or distorted light. And I think it's just difficult for me because it's just beyond anything I can conceive of in my little monkey mind.
Yeah, totally. I hear you. I'm the same way. Just words alone are hard for me. I'm such a visual learner too. Well, let me try to share this. This might help. It might not, but I was having this pretty awesome conversation with my son the other day about technology. And he was like, is there technology beyond third density? I'm like, that's a great question. What Ra says is that some planetary societies and civilizations go the route of external technology and some do not. And Ra was one that did not. Ra uses the technologies of consciousness. So, the vision that I get when I hear them talking about, creating bodies for themselves to come from sixth density to third density. I don't know if any of you have seen, Star Trek and the holodeck, where there's this room and they're able to program the room, and then the room kind of draws in all the, the details of the scene that they want to, like simulate. Well, I imagine that there literally are future technologies that are like that, and those would be outer technologies. And Ra just is able to do that with their minds. They're able to program light to manifest the form that they need for their purposes, like a holodeck, except they do it with their minds. That's the picture I get.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I am a big Star Trek fan and Star Wars fan, but the holodeck is Star Trek. And Star Trek is a great is a great example to use for the internal and external technologies, because those using the external, they're the Borg, you know, and they've become connected through merging with external technology. And I also am a big Harry Potter fan, so I think of the Room of Requirement, and with the wand being a representation of one's own will, with their wand, aka their will, they can manifest anything in this room. They have a specific room, and you can make anything in that room, and so I can think of it like that.
Nice. Diana?
I just have a little question that might not be very helpful, but when I read this, and I think of it like you do, Aaron, like a very sophisticated hologram or something. And since Ra wasn't incarnate here when they did that, that's my understanding, but they were able to manipulate light. It makes me wonder if it was the type of thing that you could have just walked right through, or whether we would have perceived it as something solid in the way that everything here is made of light and we have a perception that it's solid. It's a curiosity I have.
Mm-hmm.
Where
Yeah.
does he say that?
I think the question that Diana's asking, if I'm getting this right, Diana, was like when they created bodies for themselves, it sounds like Diana's wondering, like, well, would we be able to touch those?
I
Were they
see.
physical, or was it just like a light kind of a mirage that we could just walk through? So it was a question. Okay, so I see Scott's hand is up and Rachel also.
Yeah, I was thinking along the same lines of that everything is energy in motion. And when you can, or when we can perceive in that dimension and really see that, I'm imagining it like this, right? When you're perceiving that all that is energy in motion, you know, every particle of this desk in my hand and everything really is that. And if you're dwelling in that dimension, I can imagine that then it's you have the capability more, with some practice perhaps, of, you know, creating a physical body or appearance, or like walking through things like a wall. I was thinking, it made me think also about one of the episodes in Cosmic Disclosure, when Corey Good is with the Anshar and the Inner Earth, and he gets on one of their ships and they're going like straight for the wall. He's like, oh my gosh, we're gonna crash into the wall, and then they just end up going right through it. It's like they have the ability to do that, and they're fourth dimensional beings, supposedly.
Mm-hmm.
That's my
Yeah.
thoughts.
Thank you. Rachel?
I was only going to make a comment about them, Ra describing their appearance as golden to the historical demonstrations of those of Egyptian beings, oftentimes painted with gold, or having a golden halo, and just making that connection and wondering if it's more than symbolic, if it's more literal than symbolic, like I personally have been told to believe that the gold. I've always been told that when statues are painted golden, it's a symbol of like their enlightenment, or a symbol of the wisdom or the riches, but it could just be that they were gold.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that if you look at depictions of Ra in Egypt, you know, Egyptian sculpture and paintings, very often, not every time, but very often, they were accompanied by the solar disk above their head. And that could also be another like symbol for the fact that they kind of like, were shimmery or glowed, or, had a quality of brightness, or of, being luminous somehow. Of course, it could also just be a connection to their metaphysical connection to the sun, and their teachings about about the logos and all these sorts of things. But I like your train of thought, and I think that the sun image that goes along with Ra could also be pointing to like how people saw them. And then, yeah, it's like our visit was relatively short, for we found ourselves in the hypocritical position of being acclaimed as other than your other selves. They were seen as gods. Yeah, like they're, it's kind of like, of course they were. If they showed up and they were like these luminous beings and they were able to like do all these miraculous healings and create things with their minds, like, I mean, it doesn't seem surprising that they were seen as other than human, other than, you know, earthlings. They were seen as gods. Oh man, and that is such a huge topic. Just when we review the historical record and we look at mythology and we look at religion and we look at the word God or gods through this lens, it's like, y'all, most of the time what we're talking about is extraterrestrial beings. I mean, not all the time. I mean, I do believe that there's angels that are associated with our world and there's higher beings that are associated with our world, certainly. But yeah, just hearing their account of what happened when they visited, it just makes me think of like so many times when we're hearing past cultures' accounts of gods, we're probably hearing about all, you know, it's likely we're hearing about, you know, the Confederation or Orion or like other off-world entities who come and they're so different than us that they just are thought of as gods. It seems like.
Can I say quickly, I think it's kind of cute that they're almost naive. And what did they think? The humans are going to go, oh, cool, there's my future self. Great, you know, let's hang out. You're a zillion times more evolved than I, but we'll just hang out as equals. What did they think was going to happen? They couldn't know. We, as Ra, couldn't know. Just had to try it.
Yeah, well, they do own their naivete. We can give them that.
They do, yeah. Me too.
Nia?
Yeah. Okay. So a couple things, like too many going into right. Sleep deprived brain needs to work with words. All right. So I was having a conversation with someone who also knows Law of One, and we were having a really big discussion around the race, and that a theory is that the gold is like a golden ray that is the highest vibrational frequency that our 3D selves can relate to as being highest vibing. So like we talked about the universal white light of Reiki, where it's white is actually all the 7 visible colors, and then incorporating on the other ends of the scales the other light particles in the light spectrum that cannot be seen by the naked eye. So gold therefore is visible and is a visible representation of the highest vibration that our brain minds and third density spirit minds can comprehend. This also correlates similarly to, I'll try to bring this back around with the secret of light, that you had mentioned in your check-in about the synchronicities, and I had a huge one this week watching Nassim Haramine's quantum physics on the Gaia channel, and it was I haven't watched it in a few months for some reason, and I was like, you know what, Mama needs Saturday morning cartoons just to chill out, and I flipped that on because I don't put on screens in front of the kids, but I was like, this one's safe, I can put this on. And it was the 3rd episode, and it was spiral. Everything is a spiral in space time, and at one point he said, I believe that's what all the mystics of all the ages were trying to get to, is the central point where if everything is light, then everything is the spiral up and down in the center of this vortex. You said at the center of the eye, but that I was like, okay, I can't not say this anymore. The mystics, he believed that the mystics were trying to get to the silence, the meditation practices of all the mystics were trying to get to the stillness in the eye of the hurricane, so to speak, that center of the vortex being the stillness, which gets us back to recognizing our being part of the one infinite creator. I hope that made sense. Sorry.
Yeah, and I don't know if you know this or not, Nia, but Haramain and all those folks in that group are all students of Walter Russell. So it's not a coincidence. I saw another hand. I don't know. I think it was you, Diana. Did you want to say something, or has it passed?
I want to respect the kind of vibe of the group, and also the less transient material feels very important to me. But Farrelyn brought something up that touched on something that to me is not transient at all, which is Farrelyn, you said, how could Ra show up here in those bodies and expect us not to deify them? And I think you said, I guess they just couldn't know. As we read on, I think we find out that they do have options to look into probable timelines. And they mentioned at one point that they chose not to violate the group's free will by looking down those timelines. Other places, they seem to have a very keen sense of what timelines are probable, and it just seems available to them. I'm not sure if there's a distinction between when they can and can't see the future, what we would determine to be the future. But I personally think that maybe they could have known what they were getting themselves into, but by some effort to respect their own freedom to make mistakes, they probably didn't choose to know and went on with their experiment. That's my guess, because there are people in third density who are precognizant and who can grasp probable timelines. So I can only imagine what a sixth density entity has access to in terms of what will happen based on a particular choice. I'm thinking they were just respecting their own freedom to keep evolving. But I also want to say, I think that the material, we all have different perceptions of what material would be considered transient, and it all has value in different ways to different people on the spiritual path. So I didn't mean to
Get judgy.
Yeah, to get judgy, because I was the one who brought up, gee, I wonder if their bodies were just light or solid. I have those questions. They're getting away from Ra's main message, but I do like thinking about them. I'm just trying to focus.
You're so thoughtful and conscientious. Thank you. I just want to throw one little comment in, and then I would like to keep reading. I also, it's my sense that Ra was visited by their teachers when they were in third density, and they had a great go of it. So in their social memory complex, in their memory banks, like, this was a great idea to go to Earth and bring the teachings of the pyramids and of oneness, and like, it's going to go great. These cats are going to dig this stuff. We're going to bring it and they're going to love it. And they just didn't.
And we do.
Yeah, we do. They didn't have the negative priests quite as much going on, and the royalty thing going on Venus as Earth did back then. So, okay, hopefully it works for everybody. If we keep going, we still have quite a bit to go, and we only have a half an hour. So I'm going to read, picking up from 6.8. Questioner: where is this council located? Ra: the council is located in the octave, or 8th dimension, of the planet Saturn, taking its place in an area which you understand in third dimensional terms as the rings. 6.9, questioner, are there any people such as you find on Earth on any of the other planets in this solar system? Ra, do you request space-time present information or space-time continuum information? Questioner, both. Ra, at one time space, in what is your past, there was a population of third density beings upon a planet which dwelt within your solar system. There are various names by which this planet has been named. The vibratory sound complex most usually used by your peoples is Maldek. These entities, destroying their planetary sphere, thus were forced to find room for themselves upon this third density, which is the only one in your solar system at their time-space present, which was hospitable and capable of offering the lessons necessary to decrease their mind-body-spirit distortions with respect to the law of one. Questioner, how did they come here? Ra, they came through the process of harvest and were incarnated through the processes of incarnation from your higher spheres within this density. Questioner, how long ago did this happen in our years? Ra, I am having difficulty communicating with this instrument. We must deepen her state. This occurred approximately 500,000 of your years ago. Questioner, thanks. Is all of Earth's population then, human population of the Earth? Are all of them originally from Maldek? I am Ra. This is a new line of questioning and deserves a place of its own. The ones who were harvested to your sphere from the sphere known before its dissolution as other names, but to your peoples as Maldek, incarnated, many within your Earth's surface rather than upon it. The population of your planet contains many various groups, harvested from other second dimension and cycled third dimension spheres. You are not all one race or background of beginning. The experience you share is unique to this time-space continuum. So I'll pause there. I think this would make the best sci-fi series of all time. To like tell the Maldek story and then the Mars story, like over, I don't know, 9 movies or something. Wow, that'd be amazing. I'd watch it. Sean.
I have a question about the term harvest. It's used a lot in Love One, and I never fully understood it. So I'm gonna say something and you tell me if I'm interpreting this right. So like with regular reincarnation, like your soul sort of, once you become conscious, I mean in the beginning it's like random, and then once you become conscious you actively choose where you want to go. But the difference between harvest and that is at like harvest, does it involve like some external force that measures whether or not you pass, is or like so like from going from third to fourth, right? Like why can't I just be like, oh, I feel like I'm ready for fourth density, I'm gonna go? Like why do I have to go through harvest? And like the term harvest is like I've read someone say like it's so ominous. It's like what is it, like that movie, like the Jupiter movie with made by the, where like they literally harvest like the humans and turn them into goo to like feed, like what? I don't know. Like what is harvest?
Mm-hmm. Who wants to field that? I could respond, but I want to make space for others. BJ.
I could say something. I'll be quick. I'd be curious to hear from others too. My own personal take, and I don't claim that this is accurate, but it's just it's a sort of continuation of healing, you know, just like whatever the spirit is ready for. Like I resonate with or appreciate the image of the spiral staircase of light, and that when we're ready to ascend the staircase, we go to the place assisted that feels right and comfortable. So I don't think that it is a process that doesn't include our will and our choice. You know, it's an assisted way of just continuing the evolution. And again, I don't necessarily know that that's right, but that's the way it lives in me.
Let's do this. Let's read 6.14 and then we'll just read that one and then pause, because Rod does address these questions in that one to get into a little bit. Could somebody read 6.14?
I can read it.
Great.
I think it would be appropriate to discover how the law of one acts in the transfer of beings to our planet and the action of harvest. I am Ra. The law of one states simply that all things are one, that all beings are one. There are certain behaviors and thought forms consonant with the understanding and practice of this law. Those who, finishing a cycle of experience, demonstrate various grades of distortion of that understanding of thought and action will be separated by their own choice into the vibratory distortion most comfortable to their mind-body-spirit complexes. This process is guarded or watched by those nurturing beings who, being very close to the law of one in their distortions, nevertheless have the distortion towards active service. Thus, the illusion is created of light, or more properly, but less understandably, light love. This is in varying degrees of intensity. The spirit complex of each harvested entity moves along the line of light until the light grows too glaring, at which time the entity stops. This entity may have barely reached their density or may be very, very close to the ending of the third density light-love distortion vibratory complex. Nevertheless, those who fall within this octave of intensifying light love then experience a major cycle during which the opportunities are many for the discovery of the distortions which are inherent in each entity, and therefore the lessening of these distortions.
Does that help, Sean? Or do you still have, so what remains?
So what sparked this question was like, how did the Maldek people come to Earth? It was through harvest. Is harvest something that is continuously available, or is it something that only happen like does that only happen at these like 35,000? Is like specific times or like, hey, it's time for harvest, did you make the cut? Or like if at any given time could I be like, hey, I'm ready to graduate, like harvest me, I'm going to go to a fourth density planet, like those are just a few of the uncertainties of like what exactly is going on with harvest.
Totally. Yeah, I share some of your questions, Sean. It doesn't make sense to me when they say that Maldek, the beings of Maldek came to Earth through the process of a harvest. It's confusing because they blew up their planet. So wait, what does harvest have to do with that? But here's the things I can say that I feel like I understand about harvest. Harvest is basically when it occurs naturally and normally, it's the end of a cycle of third density. And there's this pretty coordinated process between the being of the planet, the consciousness of the planet, and this whole spiritual hierarchy. Ra talks about 3 different types of entities that show up to be able to, they basically put on the event of harvest. There's the guardians, which are beyond the octave, and they supply the light, the light love that the souls individually, one by one, ascend toward. And then there's supporters who help the entities walk that line, you know. So it's a whole like cooperative process that requires like all these different entities to participate in, which is fascinating. But they also say another point that beings can self-harvest at any time in third density if they make contact with intelligent infinity. So it does seem like, you know, harvest has some different meanings, but I think in its most common, meaning it's when the whole planet is ready to allow souls after they die to go through this special process. And that doesn't exactly seem like what happened with Maldek, because we know that later on we learned that Maldek, the souls were in a knot of fear because they destroyed their planet. So it's really confusing to me how they went through harvest while they were in a knot of fear, but that's a slightly different question, but that's what I wanted to say. Diana?
My understanding of harvest is that it's the opportunity to after you die, to be in time space, comparing your vibratory level to an emanation of light that is available to you, that is precise, and to sort of match your vibratory level to whichever density of light on that scale is a good match, and then to move toward that density of light. So harvest is an opportunity to proceed to the next density of experience, or to repeat the density that you're in for another series of reincarnations that corresponds to a certain amount of time as we measure time. So I actually don't think that the harvest that Maldek participated in necessarily is different than how Ra normally uses the term harvest. I wonder if Maldek was just, if their planet, their third density planet, was at that time approaching its harvest, maybe even spiraling into fourth density light, and things got really intense, kind of the way that they're getting really intense right here, right now, because it's our harvest time. And maybe that's when all the bad stuff happened and they destroyed their planet. And then at that point, they could, had they managed to polarize positively, they could have been harvestable at that time to fourth density. But instead they needed to repeat third density, and they chose to come here. The tangle of fear, you know, I can't really speak to, except that time moves differently in time space. But I think it's possible that they were just approaching their harvest. And so even now, like at any point, because the harvest is now, anyone who dies right now theoretically could be harvested to the fourth density if they had polarized sufficiently, right?
Yeah.
So maybe they were in the same boat at that time, and then everybody died at once, pretty much.
Yep.
And depending on their state of being, they went here or there to other realities, embodiments, depending on their state of mind and fear or trust, fear or love.
Ra has mentioned before that in the case of planetary annihilation, things seem to work a little differently in that everyone kind of gets tangled up together. So I don't know if some of them had the option of moving on to fourth density. I don't know if they were harvestable to fourth density, or if somehow this notion of blowing up your whole planet makes you all need to figure it out together again, because the karmic entanglements are just that strong or important somehow. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I don't know either. Scott?
I don't know either. That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, well, I don't know what the population was, but let's compare it to planet Earth right now, right? Like the spectrum of the polarity on planet Earth is pretty freaking wide, right? So if you can imagine that's true for them. And I think doesn't it say that some came to planet Earth through harvest and some through incarnation, like two different ways. I think that's what they said.
Oh, it's the same thing. It was harvest, and then after the harvest process was complete, then they were placed in the planet through incarnation from higher spheres.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but so that's the way I was thinking of it too, that some of them are ready for, I guess the question was you were asking is like, how could they harvest here if they blew up their planet? So my thought was just like, maybe, well, it was already been mentioned, you know, after I raised my hand, but some may have been ready for harvest and made the harvest. I don't know. I can't answer the question now. Sorry. You see what I'm saying, though? That's the question on my mind too.
So this definition of harvest as just like the ray of light with varying intensity and placing yourself on it, that seems to be a definition that works for all of these scenarios. Or like, even if Maldek, you blow yourself up, you end up in and out of fear. Once you free yourself, once they free them from that knot, I guess all the entities go into this staircase of light, and that determines where they go. I think that definition seems to address all of the. I was looking for a definition, right?
Yeah.
I think that definition works.
Yeah.
Here.
Well, it breaks. The thing is, to me, it works pretty much everywhere else it's used in the law of one, except for this one example of the Maldek planet, because of the unique and profound circumstances of what happened there.
But
I
after
think-
they free themselves, they could still go on. Like, they still need. That might be the process to determine where they go after that.
Yeah. It took a long time, though. We learned it took like a very long time for them to free themselves from the knot of fear. But another comment I want to make about why did they use the term harvest? Because it is a really troubling, it's one of the trickiest, slipperiest terms in the material, because a lot of people have very negative associations with harvest. And I think it just comes back to, it's one of these words that they chose because it was, it was appropriate from the sort of like primary spiritual distortions that were of the group. Harvest is a Christian term, and comes from the Bible, I believe. And so that's what they used because it made sense to them. But in my kind of retooling to be able to come to terms with this definition and this process as Ra describes it, it's actually super appropriate, because graduation from third density to fourth density is the whole point of the Earth's like efforts. Like, the fruit of third density is harvested souls. Like, it's like when souls successfully polarize positive or negative, that is the sort of fruit of the garden of the planet. I mean, it's a really kind of a profound thing. Diana?
Yeah, and I also view it as the harvest of the creator's experience, incarnate within the third density as us. So at the close of a master cycle, you have a harvest, which means that we're moving from one density to the next, which means the entire history of Earth's third density comes to a close, and and all of that body of experience is returned to the creator. So it's not a harvest where somebody's come in and like whacking people down and like, yeah, there's the biblical notion of separating the wheat from the chaff, which could be likened to either it's time to move on to fourth density, or it's time to be, I don't want to say cast aside, obviously, but there's that idea of like dividing and separating and sorting through and taking what's good and leaving what's not. But I think that in Ra's terms and other things they say would seem to reinforce this later on. It's a harvest of experience. It's this joyful moment, this turning point at which everything that's happened in third density is everything that's going to happen.
Yeah. And one of the key points is that this sentence, or this portion of the sentence, they will be separated by their own choice. It's a self-driven process, and it's pleasure. It's like when our souls, our spirit, they say it's our spirit complex that actually is going through this experience of light. It's what feels comfortable. We stop when it's comfortable. And if it gets too intense, we don't go forward. And that's, it's a very personal, individual process. It's not an external. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people get freaked out about, because they have associations with harvest with kind of a judging God, or an external judge that's doing the harvesting, or an external entity that's doing the harvesting. And it's like, well, that's not really what it goes on. From what Ra says, that's not really how it happens. It's a great question and super relevant. Shang, thanks for asking it. And I still don't feel resolved about how that was harvest, but I guess it's I guess somehow it was. And it might be the difference between space-time and time-space, like someone said. BJ?
Again, a plug for Concept Guide. I was just doing a little extra reading in the chapter about harvest. And it's interesting the parallel of what happened with Maldek and a reference to when the planet itself is no longer available to support third density. Like that's something that happens. Like their planet was no longer available to support third density because it was destroyed. But it seems like, at least according to this chapter, all planets eventually reach the point where they're no longer supporting third density. And so those who are not ready to polarize or to move on to fourth density, either positive or negative, will repeat third density elsewhere. So that's just another parallel. Like just because their planet became non-viable in another way, it does seem like it's parallel to the more natural route as well.
Yeah. There's so many implications and side roads we could take, but one of the things that comes to mind for me about harvest and where do souls go after harvest? Well, from what I understand, Earth's third density cycles will end and it will be offline for a while. And so for the souls on Earth who don't harvest a fourth, as far as I understand, there are no other planets in this solar system that are cycling in third density. So it's like off to another star system, which is wild to think about. Anyway, total speculation. I'm getting us off track. Sorry about that.
But it's fun. It's so fun.
It's so fun for me, for sure.
It's a party. We're just having a party.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I thought. It's like, it's fun. It's really fun.
Right. Plus, we're coming up with the main plot points for this sci-fi movie we're going to make together, right?
Is it called Reality? This is it.
A new reality TV show.
Well, we are approximately halfway through the reading. And obviously we will not finish today. So, should we try to push through a little bit more, or we only have 7 minutes left, or should we just open it up to general conversation about what we've read so far? Any thoughts?
I personally have a bias towards making sure there's space for everyone to be heard if they want to.
Thanks, BJ. Appreciate that.
I'll share something really quick just because it keeps popping in my head. While like I've been listening to this discussion and it just keeps coming up, and that was the idea of having a sponsor. And I don't remember what peoples the Maldekians represent on Earth. And I also could be mixing up Rudolf Steiner's teachings with Ra's. But when I'm thinking about Yahweh, what Ross says about Yahweh is, I think of Yahweh as kind of like a sponsor, someone who, an entity or entities who took a group of people under their wing, and taught them and protected, and various methods of service. And I can't remember what the story for Maldekians is once they get to Earth, but I wonder if there was an agreement that they would have a sort of sponsor, someone from the Confederation that could come and kind of help them unwind their distortion. Pick your favorite style, so that they don't repeat the planet destroying pattern.
Yeah, I appreciate that thought. They do. I think we get into it later when we return to Maldek. There was a lot of my understanding is there was a lot of Confederation helpers who showed up for the Maldekians. So I would assume once they came to Earth and they were incarnated here, that those guardians or sponsors would continue to support them. I think that's a really good instinct. And
went to second density bodies, right?
yeah, they came into second density bodies, and they're one of the 3 types of big feet. The Maldekians are one of the 3 types of big feet. And they're not all left. A lot of them have already finished the work that they did here, you know, so there are still some Maldekians, but I don't get the sense that there's a ton left. Because it was hundreds of thousands of years ago that they came here. So they had a long time to do that work they came here to do. Diana.
I'm also trying to recall. So Earth was second density at the time that they came?
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's why they chose those ape bodies, the Bigfoot ape bodies. Well, those were available as bodies at the time. And Ra later says that they actually transplanted their third density consciousnesses into these second density vehicles because of the limitations that those vehicles had, so that they could recapitulate some lessons without perhaps the physical, genetic ability to become bellicose or violent again. Pretty weird.
So fascinating. So fascinating. All these details, you know, cast such a different or paint such a different picture if you go through ancient history, ancient archaeology, all the human knowledge. If you apply the law, what Ra teaches, like, it changes so much about how we understand our past and this planet.
Hi, Marcus.
Marcus. Shang, when Asher was a baby, he was also he had a lot of allergic issues, and BG reduced her diet to 3 things only for months. I think it was like 4 months or something. She only ate 3 things that were like completely we're supposed to be like the lowest, allergy causing foods.
Yeah, that's where I was trying to figure out what to eliminate. And Dasha was like, I can't eat anything anymore.
Mm-hmm. It's hard.
I ate lamb and zucchini. Actually, it was 4 things: lamb, zucchini, pears, and amaranth.
Oh God. Yeah, we might end up there. We'll see.
It actually was kind of fun after a little while because it was just super simple.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, it started out like, what?
Well, friends, are there any final comments or questions that want to be asked before we close today?
I have one final question, which might be too long, but so like once we move to 4th density, like there's like a 4th density body, right? Like that's different from their density bodies. And Rari said like there are some hybrid half 3rd, half 4th density bodies. Is the 4th? You know what? Let's talk about this in another meeting.
Yeah,
It's a
we're
great-
gonna get there.
It's a great question. Yeah, we'll get there.
Neil or Spirit Song, do you feel like saying anything?
I'm interested in the council and don't want to get into that right now, but I might do some more research on the council.
You can't hear me, Aaron?
It's very, very low. I can hear you a little bit.
When you get closer to the mic, we can hear you better.
Just saying how much I appreciate it. And I'm in more quiet mode right now. which is good because sometimes I can tend to talk too much when I'm talking. So, but I'm taking a lot in and appreciating so much the diversity of awareness and perspectives here. And I just wanted to thank you all for that. Mhm.
Thank you.
both. It's nice to hear your voices. I know we heard you in check-in, but I appreciate hearing from everybody. And Fairland said, thanks to Ra for today's meeting.
Thank you, Ra. So I guess we'll go ahead and just pick up again on session 6 next week. We'll finish it next week. That sounds good to everybody. There's enough material that we didn't cover. I think it's worth it. So that's the plan.
Cool beans. Cool beans.
Thank you all so
Yeah.
much. It's such an honor to study with you guys.
Good luck, Shang.
Thanks.
Bye, Nia.
See you guys. See you next time.
Thank you, Aaron, PJ.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
There's
Bye,
a
everyone.
cookie. I see a cookie. I ate it.
Bye.